What's up, dudes and dudes to the internet? My name's Seth, and we are continuing our Xbox / PS4 tutorial of Trove. I ended up having a very lengthy video that was kind of explaining the first beginning half of the game and explaining a lot of the different gameplay mechanics and stuff like that. And today we're going to continue that, but of course, if you want to refer to the first video for a lot more extra details and stuff like that, because as per today, I think we're going to be able to get through this pretty quick, hopefully anyways. But how y'all doing today, folks? Hope you're doing fantastically wonderful. Hope this video makes your day even better. That was a golden soul. One thing before we get started I wanted to mention is that so long as other players are in the neighborhood, because I did mention that loot ends up working this way when you complete dungeons and stuff, where it's all shared between all the players that are around you. But if we actually had somebody else, and so long as we're close enough in proximity that they would destroy this ore, it means that we would actually end up getting it in our own inventory as well. That's one of the things that I still love about this game to this day, is the fact that everything is so co-op driven, you know, and you don't have to even bother trying to get into a group or anything. In fact, there is no group system, which is absolutely crazy, isn't it? But before we get started with all that, folks, we very much appreciate if you would hit that like button. Helps me out more than you know. And without further ado, I gotta get my grind on here and keep on farming for some formicite so that we can end up completing the next part of our quest, the starting tutorial quest, and craft ourselves a forge. Then we can actually talk about, or I can explain to you a little bit about how the gear and forging ends up working. While I did explain it in the last video, now I'll be able to actually show you a prime example. Oh, and if you're a new player and you're wondering where you get formicite or infinium or any of the different types of ores, most of all, it depends on the biome. You just kind of got to go and search it up yourself. But otherwise, I would say that the undead biome is actually really, really good for shapestone and formicite. And Candyland, the candy biome, is actually one of the absolute best for any types of ore, so long as you can end up finding an ore pocket cave. But for the most part, you just got to go into as many caves as possible, just searching for it all. The difference is that with Candyland, these caves are actually on the surface, just inside a chocolate lake. Unfortunately, in these beginner worlds, though, it seems like formicite is definitely a harder resource to come by. I haven't really been running into it that much, so hopefully we've got enough. Let's actually take a peek right here. And see whether or not we can actually craft the forge. Okay, we can, and we can craft the Ringcrafting one as well. I don't know if we can make all of that today, or all of that right now, I mean. We'll definitely make it all today, don't worry. Get out of that inventory there, please. And where did it end up going, or did that actually... Aha! So that's actually something that they don't have on PC. Normally you have to go and click on cancel. In the console one, I guess just pressing B or back or whatever is just going to automatically end up canceling the crafting, right? So this is the forge. There are actually a couple of different forges in the game, but this one, for all intents and purposes, is the big main one that you're going to end up using, right? So what does the game want us to do? Craft and use a forge to upgrade your equipment. Yeah, this is how to get the best possible gear. Kind of, but the gem system actually takes front and center over the gear at the late game. Now, the way that this ends up working, of course, we just got all our different resources and stuff like that, which I'm not exactly sure why it's even showing us all of this on the right. By the way, I do want to mention that for 500 credits, as you can see right here, you can actually expand your inventory. You'll end up getting a couple free inventory expanders through Mastery, as far as I remember, but... yeah, for the most part, you kind of stay away from that one unless you really, really need the space. There is a new inventory system that's coming to the PC version very, very soon, so hopefully that'll come to consoles at some point, because otherwise that one's going to be a game changer. So anyways, let's go to the forge interface. Now we can select any piece of equipment that we want, and of course, as you're forging up, it's going to end up costing different resources depending on the rarity of the item itself, right? So once you get to shadow items, you're gonna need to use flux as well as Eyes of Cthulhu and stuff like that, right? So let us, how come it doesn't, do we upgrade like that? How do we actually upgrade? What is the button to upgrade? I guess it's just forge item. It's kind of weird how the console interface seems to generally just be really, really broken, you know? Like it's using all of the things from PC, but they just squeezed the button prompts down into the corners and stuff, you know? Open the store and navigate to the buy menu. Oh, by the way, I also wanted to mention that the way that you end up getting that beta exclusive dragon, which is actually just a rehash of the friend referral dragon on the PC, is you have to buy something out of the store in order to actually get it. So maybe this will end up counting if we can end up getting the you can get a free resource box under the packs tab. So let's see whether or not we can actually end up. Why? Oh, there we go. Does this actually count? If we get this free pack right here, can we get this dragon? No, we cannot. So hashtag confirm, folks. The only way that you can get that beta bonus dragon is by spending real money, which means that I, despite playing this game for 50 zillion years on the PC and now starting on the console, will never end up owning this stupid dragon. Well, at least I got it on PC, so I could care less. Gain enough power rank to be able to enter the Master World. Oh no, I don't even know how much PR that was, but either way, I think we gotta go and level up a little bit. Aha! So this is the desert biome for anybody that's just tuning into the console series. And everybody on PC already knows all of this stuff, you know, all the different biomes and everything like that. I'm very interested to see whether or not I can actually manage doing a dungeon like this. I don't even know how I did that. Oh, geez, make it stop, seriously. But yeah, that was pretty insane, honestly. Because platforming is gonna definitely be a chore with a controller, especially with the frame rate issues as well. Now, here is something interesting, because as you end up equipping new pieces of gear, you can actually see that this is going to end up giving us a lot more power rank. While it's not going to show a side-by-side comparison of the gear, like the power rank comparison, the fact of the matter is that gear is just going to end up giving you power rank. Now, this is a good point that this actually showed up on the interface right here. As you get those adventure boxes just randomly out in the world, they're just a generic loot crate you end up randomly getting while you're fighting enemies and stuff like that, right? What ends up happening is you have a very rare chance of getting a mount out of those chests. And those chests in general are very, very hard to come by in the first place. But you can end up buying unlock key. I don't know why. Anyways, in the store, they should have a golden key. I don't know why this game is still obsessed with actually using them. Let me see if I can track these down. Yeah, the golden key right here for 2,000 credits, which is definitely not worth it. If you're a new player, don't buy these. They're a beginner's trap. What they're going to end up doing is pretty much guaranteeing you a mount out of one of those loot boxes. But the fact of the matter is that none of the mounts are really worth dropping down the equal value of 2,000 credits, right? So I'm gonna do a quick little rundown of the shop, by the way, just so you kind of have a good idea, being a new player and all. I'm sure that, you know, a lot of this stuff is very daunting, but at the same time, a lot of the stuff in the store is actually a beginner's trap, so you gotta be careful for it. Tradable class coin, what that is just a class coin, which is going to end up unlocking any of the other classes, but this is a tradable coin, so you can sell it to other players, right? Inventory expander, self-explanatory. As I mentioned, you can end up expanding your inventory. Pinatas are an item that you end up throwing down on the ground, and then people end up destroying them, right? And then confetti ends up exploding out of them, and you can rarely end up getting a mount out of them, a hat style, which just looks like the pinata's head, and in some of the pinatas, there's actually different weapon styles and stuff like that, but for the most part, not really. The whole thing about these pinatas, though, and this is kind of how the loot system works in general, while Trove actually does share loot between everybody around you, the maximum amount of people that can get loot is 8 players. So, for example, if you have 10 players all huddled around some pinatas that are thrown on the ground, only 8 of the players are going to actually end up getting items, and it's going to randomly pick them. This works for dungeons and everything actually, except ore, I'm pretty sure is shared amongst everybody because it's a resource rather than being a piece of loot. I could be wrong about that one, so don't quote me on it. But pinatas are a little bit different because the person who throws the pinata is always going to end up getting one of the drops. So that's why it says 7 random nearby players. And the person who throws the pinata is always going to get all of the drops as well. Kind of like their own instance of the drops. So that's really, really good for that. Heartophone is what you use on another player. It says right there, you can mark another player, give them a red name for 24 hours. I'm surprised how cheap they are right now that they're on sale. Good. Eyes of Cthulhu, honestly speaking, you're not going to buy any of these. Same with the Tentacles of Cthulhu. These are the ones that I mentioned you're going to need to forge some of the late game gear, and the Tentacles are actually to randomize the stats on your gear, which refer to some of my tutorials in the links below to find out which stats you actually want on most of your gear. And then there's just going to be a bunch of different mounts. You can see Sir Sebastian here is actually for cubits. All of these guys are just all credits. The Bulldozer, you have to keep in mind what this mount does and why he's so much more expensive than the other mounts is it actually has functionality. So it will only end up working in a club world, but it will actually destroy all of the blocks in front of it so long as your game isn't lagging like crazy and you're teleporting all over the place. Typical of what happens with Trove. But either way, it ends up becoming an essential item for builders because of the amount of time you save with terraforming and stuff. And then they've got like, this mount is absolutely disgusting. And in general, again, if you want to end up seeing all of these mounts, I have videos on those as well, folks. And then there's a couple different wings that you can get, which the price is... It used to be 20,000, now they're at 25,000. That's pretty insane. And these are the legendary tomes I mentioned in the last video, where if you have a legendary tome, you can only get the items out of it once a week. And you get items out of it by completing X amount of dungeons is going to fill up the tome bar of experience. And then you're going to end up getting the items out of it. The growth tome right here is pretty useless. Insta growers are okay for starting players because there's going to be like, there's a little bit of a gardening profession. Hopefully we'll get to talk about that, but honestly, who knows? Flasks in general, you just kind of look at these and pick and choose the ones that you want, but in the late game, you're going to require Death Defying. That's pretty much the only actual flask you really need in the game, because what it's going to do is when you end up taking taking fatal damage, I should say, it's going to instantly revive you back to a percentage of your health. The reason it's required at the late game is not many characters, so long as they're built properly, are going to end up getting one shot by everything, right? And then Martial Emblem and Arcane Emblem are mandatory emblem effects for a fighter, like a melee fighter or a magic or ranged character. What these are is the way that it ends up working. Let me see if I can get out of the store and show you this. So there's your flask, and then on the left and right there's going to be emblems that you can choose, which will end up casting when you end up using the flask. That's why they're called an emblem effect. The reason that the Arcane Emblem and Martial Emblem are mandatory is because essentially what you end up doing in Trove is going into a dungeon, using a flask just to trigger the effects, and then you kill all the enemies because it ends up making your attacks that much stronger, right? But anyways, then there's a bunch of costumes. You could buy either the mystery boxes, which is like a loot crate that has a random chance of dropping any of these other costumes. Dragons is just relating to dragon coins, which you're going to need to craft dragons. Links will be in the description for a dragon tutorial, because otherwise I don't want to get into that if I don't have to. Greater Dragon caches have a very, very rare chance of dropping a fully complete dragon that you can actually you can eat the egg and get a dragon for free, or you can end up trading the egg. Usually everything in Trove is actually untradeable unless you end up spending real money for it, right? And then Chaos Chest is going to end up being kind of the random loot crate that you're going to end up getting the most in Trove, at least eventually later on, because eventually you end up having Chaos Factor is what they call it, and as you have more Chaos Factor on your account, you're going to end up getting more and more daily Chaos Chests, right? And then the gems right here, the Regeminator is just to repair any broken gems, and the gem boosters are going to increase your odds of the gem leveling up, I should say. And while a gem booster item is on a gem and you're forging a gem with it, the gem cannot break. So these are just the items themselves that you could end up just buying yourself. So you could risk the gem booster boxes, or you could end up just buying the clovers and luck bugs and everything. Ninth Life is pretty much the only one that's kind of a guarantee, but honestly speaking, it's failed quite a few times for some people. Patron is the monthly subscription that you could end up doing with this game, which ends up being pretty crazy, honestly. You know, as far as the late game is concerned, it definitely is a requirement, but at the beginning of the game, while your magic find stat is very, very low, it's not really useful at all. Anyways, folks, sorry that we spent so much time in the menus. While I did think that this was definitely stuff that was worth mentioning, I very much acknowledge that it's kind of a little bit more boring, the kind of things that we're talking about today. It's a little less action-driven, but that's why I wanted to save all of the things that we're talking about today in the second part of the tutorial rather than doing it all in the first one, right? So here is a purple portal which just warps you into the dungeon. This is actually a 3-star dungeon right here, or a large dungeon on the map, as you can see. Recipe dungeons, by the way, you end up getting a recipe item out of it. No loot, no nothing, just the recipe. And what that ends up doing is unlocking a random prop item of the equivalent biome. So if you find a recipe dungeon in a candy biome, you're gonna unlock a candy prop that you can end up building into your cornerstone, or you can just end up throwing that into your club world. Now, the way that the 3-star dungeons work is usually they'll end up having 2 side enemies, like that guy right there. And what these enemies are going to essentially be, I like to call them a 1-star enemy, and then all the average dungeons that you actually find out in the world, I like to consider those a 2-star dungeon, because with the way that it works, these enemies that we're killing right here, although the game considers them a 1-star, which is the same as just the normal dungeons are 1-star as well, the enemies that you fight in a 3-star dungeon are actually a lot weaker than normal dungeon bosses outside of the 3-star boss, which is up here, and he's gonna end up having a boss effect and just be all beautifully strong. And oh, I knew that was coming, because this is actually one of the stronger enemies in the game. At least if you're at the beginning of the game, you're gonna see different variations of the punch bot in all the different biomes, and yeah, they can one-shot you, man. That was I'm surprised we didn't end up dying. Oh, cool. So we ended up getting a legendary piece of gear. Now, while this might seem like a big deal in most games, unfortunately in Trove, you end up climbing in gear very, very quickly. You know, it's both exciting but also very underwhelming at the same time, just because, like, you already look, and we're already in the elite worlds, and we're gonna be in master world in no time, not to mention being level 10 and stuff. Like, it's like you can end up grinding your character and getting powerful very, very fast. It's just that we're taking our sweet time because I'm doing the whole tutorial thing, right? I want to see how much PR we actually need for the next world, but I think it might be 200. Oh, never mind, it's 160, so we're doing just fine, and the suggested level is 8 to 9. We're level 7, which means we're gonna be doing just fine, because I mentioned this in the last video as well. So long as you're at least maybe one, I wouldn't really go 2 levels away from the suggested, more that I would just do 2. I mean one, jeez Louise. See, I've been doing the tutorial too long, right? But now we have to craft the ring crafting bench, and I did explain how, I gotta get more Firmicide. I did kind of explain the professions in the last video, so I'll kind of briefly talk about them today, just so that we don't end up having to take all of our time with it. But I want to show you this, because this is actually very, very important. If you end up going into the gardening, you're going to need, like, this is a required item, these sunlight bulbs right here. And the way that these end up generating is on the map. You can see the biome that has the sunflower. That is like a peaceful hills biome. I think that's what the game considers them. And they are going to be the only place in the entire game where these sunflower dungeons are going to generate. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to be spending a lot of time just going through these, grabbing all of these items and using them to get your gardening up. The big reason that you want to get the professions up in the first place is because, you know, they can unlock different mounts and stuff like that, all sorts of different items, but most of all, they end up giving you a ton of mastery in the end. And at the beginning of the game, I would say that your goal is not even, like, maxing out a character is one thing for sure. So you're probably going to start out just trying to max out one class. But then the next big goal that you're going to be going for is trying to max out your mastery. And that's going to end up taking a lot of time to end up doing. Not exactly sure what max mastery is in the console version. I'm going to assume it's just 300, same as the PC right now anyways. And I think that that's going to be the next big goal, and then once you get even further than that, you're going to be going for like better gems or making stronger classes, or even maxing out the level of all your classes, because that is very, very time consuming, right? Boy, I can't wait till we get a normal mount, because this mount right here and the wings, the first wings that you get from Mastery, are actually the only wings and the only mount in the entire game that are slower than all of the others, because as I explained in the last video, how everything about this game is about vanity items and putting styles on top of other styles and stuff like that, right? The mounts all operate the exact same way, and so do the wings. So you're just kind of picking and choosing your favorites rather than picking ones for utility. Oh, and certain ores are going to be biome exclusive. Like these glacial shards right here are only in the ice biome. Sometimes you can find them on the surface, but more often than not, you're going to end up finding them underneath. I'm having a very hard time finding Formosite though, which is really, really strange because normally it's very common. Oh, also, as far as the mining is concerned, I'd recommend getting the Boomeranger as your alternative class, just for one of the starting characters at least, because one of his abilities throws down a big bomb that blasts all of the blocks beside it and on top of it to smithereens. So he's actually a fantastic character for mining at the beginning of the game. Ooh, I see some Formosite, but more importantly, this is a good opportunity to explain these random boss mobs. So you're going to end up seeing just randomly out in the world these enemies that are going to look the same as every other little enemy that you find, but they're going to be bigger and they're going to have a boss effect with them. Haha! I'm too good at this game. And what these guys are going to end up doing, I'm not actually good, that was a fluke, is they're going to end up dropping their own set of gear, as well as, most importantly, if you're in an elemental world, which we'll hopefully get to talk about those sometime in today's video, or at least soon. It's mostly related to the gems, but if you're in an elemental world and kill those dudes, you're going to end up getting some elemental gem boxes. Most of all, that ends up coming into play in the late game. Also, I ended up just getting a somber soul in this biome. That's another thing. Like I said, there's different ores that are only going to be located in a specific biome, and unfortunately, the game doesn't really tell you about it. But for the most part, you're going to end up finding these special ores just next to normal ore pockets. It's just going to generate the same as normal ore. It's just only going to be in a specific biome. This is Infinium, by the way. Not sure if I got this on camera, but this is actually a very, very valuable ore that you definitely want to get your hands on. Most of this ore is related to either the professions or just trying to craft your first mount in the first place, right? Ooh, we ended up getting the wings from our mastery. Yummy. So now I can actually equip them here and kind of show you how they end up working. But first, I want to grab... Oh, these are both requiring level 8, so I gotta go and complete some more dungeons, huh? So now the wings automatically ended up equipping, but these ones are pretty bad, honestly speaking. Normally the wings all end up having the same stats, but the way these end up working is you just jump in the air and then hold jump. and then you're going to be gliding. It's not like Mario flying or anything like that, where you're going to be able to gain altitude or anything. You're always going to end up descending, but you can kind of lean your character a little bit, and there's not really that much to it. It's just more like a hang glider, right? But later, you're going to be able to craft a item that is called an updraft block or side draft or downdraft, and what those are going to do is while you're gliding on top of them, you're going to be pushed in either of the directions of the corresponding block, right? So usually people will have a lot of updraft blocks on their cornerstone so that you can get some major altitude. But anyways, let's craft this ring crafting bench right here. And then I'll kind of show you a little bit of the profession and see how much time we end up having for today, because I'm really hoping that I don't have to split this into multiple tutorials, but I think beyond this video I'll probably just consider it the Trove series and just explain as we go along, because I don't want these episodes to end up all being 40 minutes long, right? So the ring crafting is, this is how all the professions work in the game, right? Is you're going to end up starting at the lowest tier, which is all these ones right here, and then there's going to be a different resources for the different professions. Of course, you know, if you're gardening, everything requires poop, which means that you have to actually craft the compost, then you place it on the ground, and then you have to wait a certain amount of time before it actually turns into compost, and then you can actually use it for crafting. So there's a lot of waiting involved with the gardening. And also, just a pro tip, as far as the gardening is concerned, make sure that you have your plants out in the open where the sun can get at them. You wouldn't think that this game has depth like that, but it secretly does. It's not that it's depth, it's just something to do with the coding and the lighting, right? But anyways, this is how the ring crafting works. These diamonds only end up coming into play in the later tiers, which it doesn't seem like they're letting us actually go to any of the other tiers, but needless to say, you can see our ring crafting skill is 0. So for every ring that we craft, let's craft this one right here. For every ring that you craft, you're going to end up getting 1 skill point. We need 50 to get Dabbler, and then you're going to have to craft 50 more, because your skill level is going to stay at 50 once you get to that point. You're going to have to craft 50 rings within the Dabbler tab, which means more resources taken to get to 100, etc., etc. And oh my goodness gracious, you jerk! These are invaders. There are so many different parts of this game that end up taking these guys for a ride. What ends up happening is usually I think the average is like 12 minutes plus or something like that, they'll end up just spawning. And as far as I'm concerned, I remember back when I first played the game, that was our first death too, by the way, that, yeah, they're pretty much there to prevent you from just standing around AFK, right? So, or away from keyboard. So technically speaking, you can end up constructing walls tall enough that they can't get over it, but yeah, it's not really that big of a deal, right? So what do they want us to do now? They want us to get enough power rank so that we can go into an Uber world. However, I do want to show you this. I want to show you how these end up working. I also want to kind of know how we can, oh, that's how we select something onto our hotbar. Okay, so the way that these work is these are throwable boxes. We're going to throw it on the ground, and that's going to turn into a random ring. It's going to end up having random stats. The stat values are set, of course, based on the rarity of the ring, and then it's just going to be difference of. So I ended up crafting a power ring, which means that the first stat is always going to be physical damage. There's one for, there's one for magic and another one that's kind of more focused on mining and stuff. But we ended up getting stability. Stability is one of the most useless stats in the entire game. All it does is prevents you from being knocked around. The ring unfortunately didn't seem to auto-equipped, but at least we can kind of cheat and get it in right there. So that ended up giving us a little bit more PR, power rank, but not really. For the most part, though, we did get a little stronger. Now I gotta go and grind up to level 7, though. But before I go and do that, I want to explain one of the most confusing, un-noob-friendly dungeons of the entire game. Gather 3 Trovians at this location. You know what a Trovian is? It's what this game calls its players. And this is the only dungeon in the entire game where Trove refers to its citizens and players as Trovians. Nowhere else. This is the only place. So if you can gather 3 people here, it's just a free dungeon. You're gonna get some XP, and then you'll get a loot chest. Oh, also, we're not going to get to use any of those today, but those are Mag Rider trails right there. Mag Riders are going to end up being a surfboard that you'll pull out. You're really, really slow when you're walking on it, so you don't actually end up using them outside of getting on this, and it's pretty much like a minecart from Minecraft. So these are kind of like booster rails right there, and you're going to sit on that, and it's going to boost you up to the top, because otherwise, this dungeon right here, that's this giant Invader Knight, is so difficult without Mag Rider, like you have no idea. This tower at the hub, by the way, you keep ascending it to get to the higher and higher portals. So you can see we need 250 power rank to enter the Uber world, which means that I'm going to have to go and start grinding because I got to get to level 9 or a 10 at least. But we're not going to have enough time for that today. So I'm going to kind of skim past a lot of this stuff and just give you an idea as to how the elemental portals work and everything like that. So once you get to U4, which of course is going to require 700 power rank, so on and so forth, you're going to have the water world. And while you're in the water world, every dungeon that you complete is going to end up also dropping a water elemental gem box. And what those boxes are going to contain is a random generated water gem, right? So you're going to go into that world, and it's pretty much a water world. It's only going to generate an ocean with a couple different islands. It's pretty cool the first few times you go there for sure, but you're going to want to get your hands on a boat so that you can actually get some more travel time going on. Boats are very, they're very underwhelming. What you end up doing with a boat, they don't operate like wings or a mount or anything like that. You just go into the water, equip your boat, and then you slowly accelerate, and that's pretty much it. You can use your cannon and shoot at things, but the damage that you actually do with them is not enough to actually hurt an enemy or anything. But anyway, once you get to U5, then you get to the air elemental portal, and this is going to be kind of floating island dungeon world, right? And you're gonna need your wings if you're gonna actually take on this world. And the exact same as the water world, dungeons you complete in here are going to give you air boxes, and then you use those boxes to get yourself some air gems. And then so on and so forth. But if you're sitting there wondering why would you end up going to U6 instead of U5, that's because not only is the gear that you're going to end up getting, the quality of gems ends up increasing a tier for each Uber world you end up going in. And if you go to the normal Uber world, you're going to have a rare chance of getting, just because it's not guaranteed every time when you complete a dungeon, you're going to end up getting just a general gem box, and that's just going to have any of the elemental gem types and just random generation. So it's not really an ideal thing. And then you get up to the fire world at 2,500 PR. That is not a good world at all. It's absolutely disgusting. It's all fire and brimstone, and it's orange and looks like Kool-Aid. And then once you end up getting to U8, this is when you start getting to the closer part of the end game for sure, because once you go into U8, this is the Everdark. This place is really, really uggles. It's really gross, but is a requirement for late game. Because as you end up completing shadow towers and stuff, we'll talk about those once we end up coming across them for the first time. But otherwise, for today, I'm going to just explain this last bulk of content, and then that's going to be it for these long tutorial videos. Otherwise, I'm going to treat this series as if all of you are new and watching. So when we end up coming across something for the first time, I'm of course going to explain it properly. But needless to say, when you go into this world, that is where you end up getting your class gem, which there is one class gem for every class in the game, and it's going to augment and change one of your abilities. U9, which is the final portal up here, that's when you're at the end game, is when you're at U9, and the gear ends up going up to Shadow 1, Shadow 5, Shadow 1 to Shadow 5, and then you can get to Radiant and Stellar. The gems kind of end up working the same way, except instead of Shadow 1 to 5, it's just Shadow. So once you go to U9, the common gems that you get out of the gem boxes are going to be Radiant, while the rare ones you end up getting out of the boxes are going to be Stellar, and those are the strongest gems in the game, so long as you end up getting lucky enough with them, right? And then up here, this is just a teleporter that takes you right back down to the bottom. And these are the air gust blocks that I was talking about, by the way. So you just fly over these, and woo! It's beautiful. There you go. Also, last but not least, just because we're kind of in the hub, I want to explain a little bit right here. So over there is where you're going to end up seeing different club worlds and clans based on the amount of props that they end up getting. They're going to end up showing up there kind of as a totem thing. Over there, that is where you end up crafting dragons. Check links in the description for tutorials on how you actually craft dragons and everything like that. But once you have an understanding of it, you just go over there and there you go. These houses, that one right there actually has a table for all of the seasonal props and some mounts, but not really. I think it's actually just a mag rider. Over here is kind of like the fisherman, so you end up getting your fishing rod from this guy, and then you can end up crafting like ships and sails and stuff like that. So we're gonna work on all of that stuff within the console Let's Play series for sure. But fishing essentially is just you throw down your lure, you wait for it to bob under, you pull out a fish, there you go. And depending on the biome that you're in, you know, you're gonna end up getting different types of fish. So there's gonna be a different fish even here in the hub. They call it the hub hugger. And then there's gonna be the lava hub hugger, which is a secret fish. You have to go way to the bottom right and edge of the hub to actually get to. It's very difficult for new players, but very confusing for everybody that doesn't know about it. Anyways, those different fish are going to be loot collected into Glim, which is one of a very common item that you're gonna need for crafting and stuff like that, as well as just rare scales and stuff like that that you're gonna use on this merchant and on this crafting table over here. But anyways, folks, sorry to say that's all the time that we have for today, and I'm probably not gonna end up doing like the next videos are definitely gonna be long videos as far as my Trove series is concerned, but for the most part, they're not gonna be like 40-50 minutes. Don't worry about that one, okay? So either way, thank you for having the patience to tough it out through the video. I very much appreciate it, and I hope that you found some bit of useful information here. Of course, as we're just playing through the Trove console series, I'm gonna be talking about pretty much everything for the first time, and then once I actually have talked about it, then we can slowly start to just experience the game for what it is without having to explain everything all over again. But not that I mind, I enjoy it, and I hope that you found it helpful. Thanks for watching though, folks. It's all the time we got. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content. Sayonara and stay epic, everybody.